What is going on, guys? It's me here back with another First Descendant video, and Nexon just dropped a bunch of news on us today, so I will be going over all of it. We have a big patch that just dropped today. We also got a lot of information on the next season patch that is coming on October 10th, so I'll be going over that as well. And we also got a nice little web event. You can get some nice rewards from that. I am going to break the video up into chapters, so if you want to skip to a certain part of one of those three things, there will be chapters in the video below. But anyways, let's not waste any time and get right into this update that we got today. So the first big thing with this update is we can now queue public invasion missions. So if you just come to the invasion screen, you're going to now see the start public operation option. So you can now do these with other people, and you can also queue them with a party. So if you group up with some friends and start it as a private, you'll be able to run it with them. And quite possibly the best change of the patch right here, they actually took the storage unit from here that nobody really liked the location of, and they moved it next to the mailbox over here. All right, and now let's get into the Freyna buffs. So they made a bunch of changes to Freyna, some buffs to her, and some changes to some of her Transcendent mods. So we're going to get into that. So the first thing they changed here is they've changed her passive contagion links. So now when Room Zero Trauma is inflicted on an enemy, which is her passive, that basically is inflicted when you use her abilities, killing them has a chance to spawn a toxic pool under their feet. And we'll check that out here and see if I can get it to proc. And as you can see, we got it to proc there. And when other enemies actually walk over that, they're also going to be inflicted with the Room Zero Trauma. So this can end up being a chain reaction with those pools that spawn. So good change there. Basically means we're going to have a lot more dots on the ground all over the place. Now the next change they made is on her one ability called Venom Trauma, and they increased the damage of the Room Zero Trauma on the ability itself, and it also now inflicts panic rather than poison. And essentially what this does is more damage than the previous poison effect, so the ability is just going to tick for more damage, but it also lets you stack it with other dots such as your dot from this ability, which you can see here. These are now stacking much more dots per enemy with just those two abilities. And similarly, they also buffed defense mechanism. So when you are hit by enemies, this now inflicts an effect called Despair, which again is similar to poison, except it's going to do more damage, and it's going to let you stack it with your other dots, like your dot from your 1 and your 3. So they're basically just making each dot do more damage and also letting you stack them much more efficiently, which is going to end up doing a ton more damage overall. And similarly to what I just showed you, this is also on some of her Transcendent mods to let you stack those with the other dots. So in the case of Venom Synthesis, you are now going to get this effect called Putrid. Again, it's making the dot do more damage on this particular ability. And again, you can stack it now with all your other dots. So that is happening on Venom Synthesis and also on Putrid Venom. And again, similarly to the 1 and 2, you now have Putrid Venom, which has the Putrid effect. Again, same thing, it's just poison with a different name so that you can now stack it with your other stuff, and it's also going to be doing more damage. And this also rolls over with Venom Synthesis. If you have that, you are still going to have that Putrid effect on your Venom Synthesis. Now on her Venom Baptism, they have increased the actual damage of the unique weapon itself, but they did decrease the dot damage from the Room Zero Trauma, and they also renamed it to Nightmare, as you can see here. Again, this will now stack with all your other dots, so she has like Nightmare, Putrid, Poison, all that crap. They all basically are just renamed to be different effects so that they're stacked together, and the actual base damage on it is now going to be higher, so it's probably going to chunk really hard. Now her Contagion Transcendent mod has actually changed quite a bit, and if you look here, all those effects I just talked about are gone. Everything is a Room Zero Trauma now. However, it does affect our passive and makes the toxic puddles that I showed you from her passive are now going to spawn a lot more often. So I'll try to demonstrate that to you guys. And it's kind of hard to see, but in this case, you can see that enemy right there just spawned 3 toxic pools. So from Contagion, you're essentially going to be spawning a lot more of those toxic pools on the ground now. However, your dots aren't going to have those different effects, so they're not going to stack together quite as well, but you're going to get a lot more spread on your dots. And then the last change for Freyna is on Neurotoxin Synthesis. Essentially, they just buff the damage of Room Zero Trauma, so it's just going to do more damage now. All right, now let's get get into the changes for Kyle here. So the first change they have is they've changed his passive. So the cooldown is now lower, which the cooldown is ridiculous to begin with, and it's still pretty freaking high, but they did reduce the cooldown on this. In exchange for that, they have also reduced the actual shield recovery that you get from this passive. They did also make it so you don't actually have to hit enemies now to get the benefits of the passive itself, but if you hit more enemies, you will get more recovery from that. And the next change for Kyle here is that they have reduced the shield cost for his magnetic bulwark skill, and you also can now generate magnetic force, which is his custom resource, while using this ability. And this recovery is based on blocking enemy attacks, which we already had, but now you can also gain additional magnetic force based on your max shield per interval, and that interval is going to be 1 second. So every 1 second you will gain some of your magnetic force. And I can show that here real quick. So you can see my magnetic force bar is going up about every second here. So that is a pretty big change. That is a much more reliable way to actually generate magnetic force on Kyle. Then a couple other changes on this ability. They've also lowered the actual cooldown of it. Not only this, they've also made it so the barrier is stronger now. So it's going to scale based off of your different resistances. So you can see here fire resistance, chill resistance, etc. And it's also going to scale based off of your shield now. So it's going to make the barrier a lot stronger. Now you have a lower cooldown, and it's also going to help you generate your magnetic force as well passively without actually blocking enemy attacks. So a lot of buffs to his shield here. The next change they've made to Kyle is on his 3 ability, Magnetism Spurt. Essentially what this does is when you're getting attacked, it eats the attacks for you and doesn't drain your HP or shield, and instead consumes your custom resource, and then you can reactivate it to essentially do a burst around you of damage. So what they've done with this ability is first they've increased the skill range of it. So the skill range is now a base of 8, and you can expand it 250% total. They did increase the cooldown on this ability. However, it also will now recover some of your shield when you use it, as well as recovering your ally shield. You can see that here. Shield recovery is 30%, and ally shield recovery is also 30% if they are in that range, which is again at a base 8 meters. But if you expand it, that can be really helpful to recover shield for your allies that are around you. And lastly, they have weighed the damage more towards the skill power modifier and have removed some of the damage from the magnetic force modifier. Essentially what this means is it will just do more base damage. If you say don't have a ton of your custom resource built up, it will do more damage now at a base level. However, if you have all of your custom resource built up, it's not going to make the damage higher. It'll be about the same as it was before pretty much. So it is an overall buff. All right, and now for self-directed eruption, which is one of his Transcendent modules. They have changed it so this no longer heals your ally shields. It was similar to how it works on the normal ability, but it does still heal your own shields. And they've also increased the duration on the traction beam itself. So this now lasts a lot longer. You can play Katamari with all the enemies, and that will also regen your shield. All right, and now the big change here that we've all kind of been anticipating and waiting for is they have buffed his superconductivity thrusters finally. They did increase the cooldown of it, but they also increased the damage by a lot, and they've also made it so you are immune to knockback and knockdown while you are actually using and activating this ability, so it won't get canceled by some annoying ad from one of the bosses, for instance. And then for the Transcendent mod, superconductive bombing, they have also updated this, so it is now affected by skill duration. And essentially what that means is that you can fly for longer and do more carpet bombing if you want, if you spec it to skill duration. And they've also changed it so rather than each bomb costing a percentage of your magnetic force, it's a flat value now. So you can see here it's 1080 right now, and obviously if you spec into skill cost, that will go down. And that is all the changes for Kyle. Looks pretty good. All right, and lastly we have our friend Esiemo. So let's go through the changes for him, and there's quite a lot of them. So the first change here is to his passive, which essentially when you are hit, you drop a bomb on the ground. Before, this was when your shield is depleted, you would drop a bomb on the ground. Now it's just when you are hit. Is this change a big deal? Not so much, but it is still nice and it'll be more consistent. But this still does have a cooldown on it, so just something to keep in mind, but a nice little change there. However, in regards to the cooldown, each time you use an ability, you actually reduce the cooldown by 2 seconds, and they compensated that by increasing the cooldown of it at a base level. However, because you're using abilities so much on Esiemo, it is going to end up proccing a lot more often than it was before and a lot more consistently, because you don't need to have your shield fully depleted for this to actually activate. Now, this next change is pretty awesome. They have changed time bomb so you can use it while sprinting, and they also increased the projectile speed of it. So I'll show you guys that real quick. It's pretty cool. So you can now run around and throw your bombs while you're sprinting. All right, and now some big changes to his blast ability. The first change is they've reduced the cooldown on it, and it no longer costs mana to use. So proccing your bombs is no longer going to cost you mana, and you'll be able to do it a lot more often. Not only this, but they have also scaled it, so the more bombs that you place down, the more damage each one's going to do, up to a max of 8, and it's going to do 35% more damage per bomb. So just overall a lot more damage from your bombs. And this also carries over to his Transcendent mod cluster bomb here. Again, same thing. It will scale up based on the number of bombs you have. Another change with cluster bomb is that the explosives themselves actually explode faster than they did before. So when you actually proc the explosions, the little bombs that come out are going to blow up faster. Those right there. All right, and now for changes to guided landmine, which is his 3 ability. You can also now use this ability while moving, similarly to his time bomb. They also increased the projectile speed of throwing these at enemies, and they've increased the time it takes for the bomb to automatically explode. So typically when you throw these on the ground, after a certain amount of time, they automatically explode. They've increased that, and they also now made it so you can blow up your guided landmines using your 2 ability. I'll show you that real quick. You can now throw these, and you can see them attached. They take a lot longer, but I can now manually blow those up. And if I don't, it's going to take longer before they actually automatically blow up. So it gives you more control over when you want your bombs to blow up. So you can see it still has not blown up, and it finally blew up. All right, and now for Esiemo's 4 ability, his silly little running charge thing. They have simplified the skill's animation and also made it so you are immune to knockback and knockdown while using the skill, which you kind of would have assumed was already a thing, but it actually wasn't. And the madness effect that you see on the right side here, and the madness effect that you see on the right side here, after you cancel the ultimate, you get that effect. They increased the duration on that, and they also added the skill power increase, which was actually already there, but it was hidden. They've now added that into the description so you can actually see it. But the big thing here is they've increased the duration. All right, and now for his Transcendent mods, first, they've made changes to explosive evade. This is essentially whenever you dodge, you place a guided landmine on the ground. And the change they've made here is that you can now have a max of 3 of these at a time, which looks something like this. So now you can have 3 of these down. All right, and then onto explosive propaganda. They have made it so you can now use this while moving as well as his original 3 ability. This ability now also stacks, and the cooldown has been reduced. So you can have up to 2 stacks as well as the cooldown being reduced. And they fixed the scaling, so it's supposed to scale with your HP and defense, but it was actually bugged before, so they have fixed that. So it will actually do the proper amount of damage now. And then lastly, we have our creative explosion Transcendent mod. Again, they've made it so you are immune to knockback and knockdown while you are in this animation. They've also made it so this now lets you have up to 10 bombs to increase your damage per bomb. Originally it's 8, but now you can have up to 10, so you can get even more bomb damage if you are, say, trying to explode a boss or something. That could be very useful. And then they also increased, again, the duration of the effect after you end the ult. In the patch notes, they did say it's called Madness. However, in-game, it is Narcissism on this one. So they increased the duration of Narcissism and also buffed the actual cooldown decrease that you get to 40%. That's not actually a buff. It was 40% already. However, the display was showing 20%, but now it's just displaying properly. So, and that is going to do it for the Descendant buffs on this patch. Now, we also got 2 new modules in the game. One is called Biosync Shield, and this reduces HP recovery from HP orbs by a certain amount and instead heals the shield by a set amount. So this is essentially making it so those HP packs that drop from enemies just heal shield now. So that actually makes shield a lot more viable in mobbing situations and even in bossing. This is a mod that I would have kind of expected to be in the game from the start, but very good that they have that in the game now. now. And then they also added a mod called Last Stand, which essentially deals damage based on your max shield. However, it does consume all of your shield, but then it also gives you shield regen back. So I don't know if this one's going to be good. I could see it maybe being used with certain builds that stack a lot of shield, but also have, you know, a lot of health and defense. So I'm not too sure about this one, but it's kind of an interesting mod. Now, some other big changes to the game. If you actually come into the options here, we now have FSR frame generation. So this is great for people who do not have like a 40 series NVIDIA card. You can now use the AMD frame generation. This works for basically any graphics card. This will help your frame rate a lot. This is an awesome addition to the game. So make sure you enable this if you can. Some other settings that I've noticed in here that are new is you can now hide the nicknames of other players. I assume this is basically for like streamers and stuff like that. So just something there. But if you scroll down a little bit, we have something very awesome. You can now enable sprint by default. This essentially means you don't have to hold shift all the time or toggle shift on to sprint. If you enable this setting, you will now sprint all the time. I would highly recommend just turning this on, and then when you actually press shift, you will instead walk, so you don't have to break your pink finger anymore and you'll just run by default. Thank you, Nexon. Thank you so much for adding this finally. All right, y'all, and the last thing is they have added a bunch of new Ultimate Descendant packs. So there is a bunch of new skins. I'll let y'all go check those out, but here's an example. Here's the Glay one. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Yeah, yep. All right, guys, and that is it for the update for today. There is some other small stuff, but I wanted to kind of focus on some of the bigger stuff, especially the Descendant changes. Now, we also got an update on the upcoming patch for October 10th, which is the part 2 of season 1. So I'm going to go through that now. And there's some good stuff in here. They gave us some information on some of the upcoming Transcendent mods. So as y'all know, we're getting the Freyna story as well as Ultimate Freyna on the 10th. So don't really need to talk about that. However, they did give us some information on her Transcendent mods here. So the first one is Toxic Mixture. And essentially what this does is changes your contagion links into a different ability. And it's now going to inflict something called Necrosis. And that is going to be a stacking effect on the enemies. And every time you stack that up, the enemy is going to end up taking more firearm attack from you, as well as more firearm crit rate. And when enemies reach max stacks, you are going to get more firearm crit rate. So I could see this being extremely strong for bossing. I think this will probably be a bossing related Transcendent mod. That's how it looks to me, but it sounds like it might be really, really good. So keep an eye out on that. Her other mod is going to be called a Venom Injection, and this is going to change her defense mechanism ability. Basically, this is going to recover your shield, and it sounds like it's kind of like a one-time use where you use it and then you get some of your shield back. It's also going to increase your skill power modifier, which is a very good stat for dots because they have lower skill power modifiers. So that is something you are definitely going to want on Freyna. On top of this, it does also inflict the corrosion effect when they are hitting you. And when they have this corrosion effect, they are now going to take more toxic damage as well. It lowers their toxic resistance. So a lot going on with that one. It sounds really good. It sounds like it's definitely going to be a mobbing related Transcendent mod, but I could see some very cool builds with this one. Now, we also got information on Hailey's Transcendent mods. Her first one is called Super Cooled Kuiper Round. Now, essentially what this does is it's going to reduce your firearm attack and your fire rate, but it's going to make it so your weak points are hitting harder. So depending on what the numbers are, this may end up essentially rewarding you a lot for hitting weak points to where it makes you do even more damage with the Zenith Ultimate, which would be absolutely insane. And it also is going to restore your shield instead of your mana, which, I mean, not really a big deal. I would actually prefer the mana. However, if that weak point increase is high enough, it will actually make her ult end up doing even more damage, which would be absolutely ridiculous, assuming, of course, you're hitting weak points. Now, our other Transcendent mod is called Cryogenic Cluster Shot, and this is definitely a mobbing one. This makes it so essentially those cryo stacks that you inflict with like your 1 ability and your 2 ability are instead going to be called cryogenic stacks. And when you attack enemies that have those, it's going to deal AoE damage around that enemy. So definitely a mobbing thing there, but she needs a mobbing ability. So this is good news. It sounds like we're getting a Transcendent mod for that, and I hope it's good. And just a quick little note here. They also said they are going to be adding some new mods that are going to affect skill power and firearm attack rather than crit. So we'll be able to get more raw skill power and more raw firearm attack with some of the new modules they release on the 10th. And they also show a quick little sneak peek of the new Colossus here. Now, there isn't really any information in terms of how this is going to play play out, but they did say it is going to be the most powerful, and they're also going to nerf Gluttony, which we kind of already knew was coming. And same thing for the Frost Watcher here. They didn't give a whole lot of information on it, just kind of some like descriptive text, but not really any numbers. It really depends on how the passive works, how long the duration of the buff and debuff are, as to whether or not this is going to be a really strong weapon on Hailey. However, it's almost certain that it's going to be very, very good on Viessa. Now, me personally, this is what I've been waiting for the most. They are adding a new level of difficulty to infiltration operations, and this is going to be shown as 400% difficulty, basically. So where you have the 250%, you're now going to see a 400%. This is only going to show up on invasions. So the way this is going to work is once you clear the invasion out for the day, you will then be able to do these harder difficulty infiltration operations on that specific dungeon. And they've said that there's going to be more monsters, they're going to be enhanced. There's also this line that says fight endless battles, so I'm not really sure what that's about, but I like the sound of it. I hope that is an option to have some sort of endless battle. And they also said the final battle is going to be you fighting 2 named monsters at the same time, so essentially 2 of the dungeon bosses at the same time. That's what that means. And they've also said with more monsters appearing, obviously you'll get more loot, so this will probably be a great way to get like weapon parts and gold and kuiper and all that good stuff. But we also have this line here: you will get a currency that you can use at the new vendor that's coming out on the 10th. So we know that you can trade in copies of stuff to get that currency, like copies of blueprints and whatnot. You'll also be able to earn that currency from this hardest dungeon difficulty, and that vendor is going to be named ETA0. So he's going to be coming every Friday to Sunday, so over the weekend, and he is going to have a rotating loot pool consisting of what they say here: Descendant blueprints, weapon blueprints, materials, which I'm not exactly sure what that is. I assume like stuff that you find under the consumables tab, inventory expansions, that is huge, paints, etc. So they are adding some stuff that is going to help us with inconveniences. Inventory expansions is huge, paints is really nice. I do hope that they are going to add catalyst blueprints as well as activator blueprints, and hopefully some cosmetics of some sort, but this is a great start. It all sounds great so far. The most important thing to note about this vendor is that the amount of blueprints that you can actually exchange each week is going to be limited, so that's pretty unfortunate. I don't really like that, but we'll see how that plays out. And then right here, they're just adding some new cosmetics for the Halloween season, so this is a preview of some of those. All right, and now we have at the very end of this, there's a block of text here. However, they put a lot of really important information in this like text wall here, so some people may skip over it, but I got you guys. The first pretty cool thing is they're essentially going to make it so defense missions don't drag out forever, which is really nice. And they're also going to make it so more monsters spawn in those. Now, this one is huge right here, guys. They do know that reactor farming is a big issue, so they're introducing something called a reactor implant system, and this is going to allow you to implant the weapon optimization conditions of other ultimate reactors to your current ultimate reactor. So you will be able to have up to 3 weapon optimization conditions. Essentially what this means is just 3 weapon mountings on that particular reactor, and you can also freely implant based on your weapon settings. This is awesome. This sounds amazing. They explicitly state here you'll no longer have to farm a new reactor each time you switch your weapons, as you will only need to implant a new weapon optimization condition. This is amazing. All right, and that is it for the dev update portion. So I mean, this next patch looks awesome. I'm gonna keep it real. They definitely loaded up on the October 10th update, and the season 1 patch that we got about a month ago was a little bit underloaded. All right, and I'm going to go through this last part real quick, but on the website they have this event going on. Essentially you have to log in to the website, and then after that you're going to have to log into the game, then it will register you for the event. And this event is just going through and doing different missions. You can see them here. They unlock on each day up to, it looks like, the 2nd of October. There's also some weekly ones that you can do as well, and as you do these missions you're going to be able to earn points that will let you come down here and buy certain things from the shop. This does include boosters down here. There's also code breakers and stuff like that, gold and kuiper. Also some weapon parts here. I think these are for the thunder cage, but I can't really tell what that icon is. And then right here you can get obviously catalysts, bricks, all kinds of different stuff. So this looks pretty cool. Make sure you guys log in and then log into the game so that you can start actually completing these missions and earning points for it. I'll leave a link link to this in the description of the video so that you guys can find it. Anyways, guys, that is it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'm pretty excited for this patch that we got today, and the October 10th patch looks awesome. I have a lot of high hopes for this game, so I'm very excited. Shout out to my Patreon supporters as well as my supporters on the Next on Creator program and my Twitch subscribers. I love y'all. Thank you so much, and thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one.